Welcome to Keiser Voices, the story of success, brought to you by Keiser University Graduate School, here where the academic world meets personal triumph. Join us today as we dive into the captivating tales of success.
Hi, my name is Nubia Granja. I am the Dean of Academic Affairs at Keiser University Latin American Campus in Nicaragua. I have been serving Keiser University for 9 years in different capacities as career services, student services, director, writing studio, and associate dean. I have a degree in protocol and image consulting, and I'm studying for a PhD in communication sciences. And my dissertation explores the difference between male and female communication and the impact this has on corporate leadership practices. And one of the missions that I have in my own life is to be able to help women to lead from their femininity and to have more confidence. And I know and I understand that as women, we can have a lot of fears when we take over leadership positions. So one of the things that I want to do with my research is to be able to understand how women can communicate better and how that is going to impact the way that they're going to lead. So today I'm going to speak about leading with vision. Leadership with vision is highly important, and it has to do with understanding change, with being resilient, and also being able to adapt to changes. But the most important thing is that we are able to adapt to changes without losing our essence. And one of the things that I wanted to mention today is that I do feel that vision helps leadership. And the way that it helps is that as long as you have clear your vision and why you're doing what you're doing, especially when you're leading, that is going to permeate and that's going to impact the way that you lead. So in my own case, for example, in my personal life, I used to be afraid of being a leader or taking over leadership positions, higher positions that I used to have. And I think that being able to recognize my vision and what I wanted to do, especially for women, helped me to become a better leader. So I do feel that vision will help you to transform your leadership and take it to another level. And that's going to help us to lose fear and to overcome that fear that we usually have. And when I think about the times of being afraid and not knowing why I didn't want to take over leadership positions, because this is a reality for women, that there's a lot of evidence that explains that women are the ones that probably don't want to take over leadership positions because they're really afraid of losing balance. So in my case, that was the biggest fear that I had. I didn't want to lose balance. And more importantly, when I used to be a leader in higher positions before, I felt that I had lost my essence because I wanted to adapt. And that's part of the dissertation that I'm working on, able to recognize that sometimes you don't know how to be a leader. And in my case, because I didn't know how to do it, I was taking over or imitating or adapting to probably masculine traits, because the male population was bigger in those tables where I was. So I started like imitating and adapting masculine traits. And there was one point when I realized that I didn't feel myself. I realized that I was using or imitating certain traits that were not me. I think that also with your ability to recognize your essence, to understand who you are, and to be able to convey that to your teams. And that's another aspect I wanted to share about leading with vision, because that has to do with preparing for the future and anticipating the challenges that you can find. And that takes me to the times where I used to play chess. I am actually a 3 times national champion in Nicaragua in chess when I was a teenager. And when I chess, one of the things or the lessons that I got from this wonderful sport was that you have to be able to prepare for the future, that there's a move that you do at the moment, but that move is going to impact the other moves. So you have to think ahead. You have to be able to see the other games ahead, the other moves that you have to make. so that you can make the best decision. And then another beautiful thing is that you do not only see one way to move, but you also see different moves. And I think that's highly important in leadership, that you're able to see what's the best decision that you can make for you and for your team. And that takes me to a third aspect, or the last aspect that I want to mention about leading with vision. And that has to do with being able to communicate that vision to your teams. Because I mean, you can have that vision clear for you, which is beautiful. But when you're leading other people, if they don't have that mission clear for them, that's going to affect how they are going to work and how they are going to know the expectations that you have for that team. So in my case, I think that one of the things that I want to emphasize in terms of leadership with vision is that you are also able to communicate that vision correctly and clearly to your teams. And that's going to take you to a different level as a team. And of course, that's going to take you to another different personal and professional level. I am passionate about understanding female leaders and identifying the strengths that we can have as women. And one of the things that I have realized that we have to work as leaders is the ability to have confidence when we are part of a team. And I have talked to different women in leadership, and one of the things that they tell me is that they know that they are capable of a lot of things, but they lack the confidence, and they don't know how to adapt to different environments. And that's part of what I was sharing before, is that ability that we have to adapt as women, which can be a beautiful thing. And this is part of my findings in my dissertation. It's kind of early for me to share those, but as I am doing my research, I have noticed that for ladies and women, it's really common to adapt and to see, and that we're really good at picking up, the micro expressions and the nonverbal communication, and try to understand what's happening in an environment. We're really good at doing that. But I feel that there's a danger in doing that, because that means that sometimes you will be imitating certain traits that are not your own. So at the end, the main question that we need to ask when we are leading is this myself? Am I acting out of something that I believe in, or is this being forced to me somehow because of the environment? Am I being pushed somehow or pressure to act on a certain way? So that's part of the things that I have been doing my research on, trying to make sure that we are not adapting to different styles of thinking, or to different traits that are not our own. And that takes of self-knowledge. And I do want to mention that one of the things that I appreciate about women in leadership, and appreciate about myself too, is that ability to recognize my own emotions and the emotions of other people. And as I have been preparing myself and reading about, emotional intelligence, which is something common to men and women, I have found that women have this ability to recognize the emotions of other people. So I think that's one of the unique traits and the unique strengths that we have as women. And we should, I think, emphasize that whenever we're leading in our teams, to be able to recognize what's happening. And not only that, but also being able to include other people, because we have this inheritance of, fighting for our own rights and equality. And I think that is in our genes. So that is why we are so good at collaborating with our teams, and understanding how important it is that they feel included. And that's why we are leading teams, for example, it's easier for us women to ask questions about what they are thinking. If you see somebody that is not participating, or is not talking about whatever you're debating in that meeting, we as women have a tendency to recognize that and ask a question and say, hey, you, what are you thinking? What are your thoughts? I would like to know your ideas. So I think that's one of the unique strengths that we have as women, and I have seen. And whatever I'm sharing right now with you is something that is based on my own also observation. And as I started working on my dissertation in these topics, I have started to develop, these eyes to start recognizing what differences we have and how we can capitalize the strengths that maybe they are not only unique, they are not pertaining only for women, they don't pertain only to women, but we can also see how we can capitalize on these things. And at the end, I do believe that as men and women, we have a way to complement each other. And we have to be able to recognize as women what characteristics or traits or strengths we have so that we can capitalize on those strengths. One of the questions that we can have is how do we balance long-term vision with day-to-day operation? They are not contrary to each other. I do believe that we must ask, and once we have that vision, we must ask, where do I see myself and where do I see my team? And in my specific case, I remember that even though when I took over the dean's position, uh, I was kind of afraid of taking over that position. And what made it easier for me was to be able to recognize the impact that this was going to have not only on my team where I belong as an associate dean, but also the impact that it would have on women and female leadership. And when I had that vision clear, I did ask my question, or I did ask the question, where do I want to take my team? And what's the legacy that I want to give to my team? Because at the end of the day, job titles, they come and go. You can be here one day and maybe you're not the other day, but at the end of the day, the most important thing is that you provide that legacy to your teams, and that you bring up the potential of each single of every person in your team. So that was a question that I had, is where do I see myself and where do I see my team in the future? And one of the things that I have worked with my team is for them to be independent. And what I try to do is to encourage them, motivate them, empower them. And that's part of my vision, leading them to be independent, to be consistent, to have a structure, to know what they're doing, and question things. And I think that's one of the things that is related to leading with vision. It's about questioning certain things for granted, or maybe sometimes, especially this happens in academics. I come from the student services world, and there's a little bit more option for creativity in this world. So at the beginning, I thought this change and this jump is going to be difficult for me because I come from student services and now I'm going to move to academics. And for some reason, I thought that academics was a little bit more structured, which is true. But at the end, you realize that once you get to know the processes, you get to know the policies and everything, there's always room for creativity. So I think that part of my vision with my team and my day-to-day operations, these things, this is related to creativity and how to do things better, how to be more creative now in a world full of new opportunities in terms of artificial intelligence. There's a lot of opportunity for creativity and using those platforms and doing things a little bit better and be more productive, be more efficient. So at the end, it's not a matter of balancing, the long-term vision with your day-to-day operations. It is a matter of having a clear vision and being able to reinforce that vision throughout everyday activities and throughout all the decisions that you make, and empowering your team to be able to be creative so that they can adapt to changes this is part of the leadership with vision that I have talked about in my previous intervention. The communication tools or strategies that have been most effective for me in terms of leadership have to do with being able to ask questions. And every time that I take over a position, every time that I start something new or have a new project, the way that I started is asking questions, finding out what's the best way of doing things, and finding also the reasons or the rationale behind those decisions or the way that we do things, So I do ask a lot of questions, and my superiors, they would know, my boss, he would know that I ask a lot of questions, and that. But another type of asking that I do is asking for help, and I think that sometimes as women it's difficult for us to do, to be able to ask for help, because we want to make sure that everybody knows that we can do it all. Sometimes we have that. I don't know if that happens to every woman, but it happens to me. It's like sometimes I don't ask for help because I want to show other people that I can do it, that I don't need the help of other people. And we need to be able to be interdependent that way and be able to ask for help, because there's some positions that we cannot do on our own. And that is one of the things that I have realized, when I took over this position, is like I will need a lot of help, and I will need to delegate certain things. So I think that the best communication tool that I can say is just ask, like speak up, open your mouth, and reach out to people. And the beautiful thing is that the more you become vulnerable, and the more you start asking for help, and you tell people, you know what, I don't know how to do this, and you're being real about it and being vulnerable about it, people would respect you, and would be able to help you. And usually people are really happy to help you. And sometimes we don't provide those opportunities to other people. So at the end, it's a two-way street. You ask for help, you will get it, but at the same time, you are allowing other people to support you and to help you. And that brings a lot of satisfaction. And just think about any time that you have helped somebody that probably didn't know something that it took a while for you to learn. When you share that information to other people, that makes you feel satisfied, right? And that makes you feel, okay, I'm glad I know this, and that I can answer that question for this person. So I think that's part of the skills that we should have, the communication skills that we should have. Another thing that has been helpful for me is not assuming anything. And if you will ever assume something, assume the best of people. It's really hard. I mean, in practice, when something happens, we become reactive. We become emotionally reactive. When something doesn't go our way, we tend to assume a lot of things. And usually, as human beings, with our human brain, we tend to assume the worst case scenario. So at the end, my piece of advice, at least from my experience, is that if you will assume something, try to assume the best, okay? The best of other people. And that is going to help you not to be emotional, not to respond emotional or in the wrong way, but try to respond in the possible, and trying to see the best in other people. Because sometimes what affects us in leadership, or in working with other people, is that we assume that they meant harm, or they didn't mean well. And that affects not only our productivity, but that also affects us as emotionally, and will affect the communication between these two people. Because when you start assuming things and you're acting on those assumptions, that would affect the interaction that you have with that person. So I think that that's part of the tools and the communication skills that has helped me before. One of the things that I would recommend to emerging female leaders is to communicate assertively. And assertiveness is one of the things that will bring success in your communication. And whenever I explain assertiveness to my students, I tell them that is kind of the contrary of being aggressive. And it's interesting because right now, when I see people being aggressive in their communication, what I feel is that they're having some problems into communicating assertively. And what my point of view is, like, sometimes usually when people are aggressive to you, you react in a negative way. But in my case, and probably this is a strategy that I have developed, when I see them doing that, I feel, ashamed that they are not able to communicate assertively. And if I can approach them later and tell them, you know what, there's a different way to communicate that's going to get better results for you. And of course, this is my area. My area is communications. Not everybody is an expert in this area, but that's why I'm sharing these things with you. Being assertive will take you to a different level of negotiation, will take you to a different level of interaction and connection with other people. So the way that I explain it, and it's easier for me to understand, is assertiveness is the contrary to be or acting aggressively. And it's also the contrary of being passive, because sometimes some people would adapt another type of communication that is, I don't say anything, and silence is also a way to communicate. It's part of communication. So at the end, it's not one thing or the other, but how to be assertive. And that's going to translate to being productive, to being efficient. And I also believe that assertiveness has to do with wisdom and analyzing different sides of the story. And remember that I mentioned that I played chess for a long time, and I think that developed a different thinking in or a different way of thinking in my brain, because I try to see different angles, and not only the angle of that person at that moment. And that helps me to make wiser decisions and to be more assertive in my communication. So I think assertiveness has to do with wisdom that comes from experience, with wisdom that comes from humility, because at the end, for you to become wise, you have to be able to listen to others and to listen to the experiences of other people. And that's part, of developing your leadership and having that vision for you, because we can have part of our vision, could be to develop that wisdom. And I do hope and pray all the time that I'm going to with some, usually when there's these tough interactions and when you have these tough meetings, I try that communication and that conversation is positive all the time, as much as possible. I'm not perfect, it's perfect, but at the end of the day, I try that there's always a 50-50 type of communication and a connection with that person whenever I'm talking to, or whenever I'm negotiating. And I also believe that we have to be honest, and not everybody will be on board with our thoughts, with our vision, whatever that vision is. And one of the things that I have learned, and I have mentioned this to my team several times, is that it's important that when you want to impact other people and when you communicate your vision to other people, that you understand that you have to earn the trust of those people, or of the team members that you have, or the people from the different departments that you work with. It's important to earn the trust, because we cannot assume that because we have a certain job title or a position, people will do what we ask them to do. And it's a lot about earning trust. And that's part, that goes beyond communication, but I can honestly say that communication helps you a lot to get there. And you have to expect opposition, you have to expect challenges. But I think that one of the things that's going to help you to overcome those challenges and that opposition is that you're able to communicate clearly and assertively with these people, and communicate your expectations as well. And sometimes it's like I have this impression in the way that I lead, that I talk too much, or that I tell my team too much. And at the end of the day, I have realized that has brought me better results than worse results. And this is a trial and error. Leadership is a lot about trial and error, but more important than that, it's a lot about adapting leadership theories to your own leadership and to who you are. Because I do believe in authentic leadership, because there's not one size that fits all. And you can read one book, but probably it could be a good leadership book, but sometimes you will read it and you will say, I cannot feel connected with this. So at the end, it's about trying to understand what type of leadership you have. And once you find that type of leadership, you will be authentic. And when you are authentic, people will listen to you. And in my experience, what I have felt is that I thought that I was talking too much. I thought that I was sharing too much about certain things to my team. But at the end of the day, that is what I feel that has helped me to connect with my team. Now they understand my vision. They know where I'm coming from. So I do take the time, and probably we don't have too much time. We live in a hectic world. Sometimes we don't have to explain ourselves. And I understand that, and my team knows that. Sometimes I can't sit with them and explain, you know what, there's a reason for us to do this. Sometimes you have the time to do that, but sometimes you don't. But because I have created that connection, that emotional connection that is so big in female leadership with my team, they are able to understand and trust. And sometimes I tell them, you know what, I cannot explain this to you right now, but trust me. And they will say, okay, Dean, I understand, I know, I trust you enough. So we're going to go this way. I don't share the same opinion that you have, but we're going to move this way. So that is a beautiful thing. And I want to emphasize that that is one of the things that we as women provide. I think that we provide more details than men do in leadership. I don't want to generalize because that's dangerous, but what I have seen in female leaders is that we are able to communicate a lot more and sometimes better, not all the time, with our teams because we provide those details that sometimes people need to have so that they can follow up and they can do or they can act the way that you want them to act. So I would say that another important thing, not only communicating your vision and communicating certain reasons on why you're acting a certain way or why you're making a decision. Sometimes you cannot do that, but if you can share it with your team. That's going to create a connection. That's going to create some complicity with your teams. But also, your communication has to be relevant and it has to be clear and it has to be concise. And this is something that I have learned from the American culture because I come from, and some of us come from Latin culture. We tend to speak more or explain things more. That happens in Nicaragua a lot. We use a lot of words and there's a lot of flowers in the way that we speak. And I have learned that is very important that we are clear and concise in our communication, that we are straightforward, because sometimes there's not enough time to communicate with flowers. And there's different situations where the flowers are great, but I have learned that in order to be productive and to be more efficient, it's better to communicate in a clear and concise way. So that's one of the communication skills that has helped me with my teams too, and try to make it more customized to whatever they can take and whatever they can take from their positions. I mean, we in different positions at a higher level, we have the big picture. We see the big picture, and some people will not be able to see it as we see it. So that is why it's so important that we earn trust, because that's going to help the team to move, even though they don't have all the details that you have. And I would say that the last thing that I do in terms of communication and what I would suggest and recommend to female leaders, but not only female leaders, but male leaders as well, whoever has a leadership position and would like to have an impact in their communication, is your ability to ask probing questions. Sometimes people will not get to the details, or sometimes they will not provide the information that you ask them. So in my case, what helps me is to ask probing questions, go a little bit deeper into what they're saying, and direct the communication to where I want it to be. And the teams that have been working for me or with me along throughout my life, they know that that's the way that I work. And this is part of my mission, to be able to help my teams to communicate a bit better, because it is not surprise that communication has a huge impact in productivity and the way that we manage our institutions. So if we do not develop those skills, we are not going to be as successful as we should be. And sometimes, we pay more attention to different other things, but we don't realize that everything starts with being able to talk to each other. And not only to talk to each other, because we can speak to different languages, but being able to, even though we speak different languages, not literally, but sometimes different ideas, that we are able to understand the other's point of view. And this is where I am so proud of female leaders, because I think that we are causing that. And I started by saying that my mission of life in life is to be able to encourage women to take over leadership positions, not be afraid, and gain confidence. And I highly believe, and I want to dare and say this, that if we develop our communication skills, if women develop their communication skills, I can assure you that you will be able to gain the confidence that you need. So I do want to say that and finish my intervention by saying that communication skills will take you to another level in your leadership and will be able to provide that vision or part of the vision that you can have as a human being and a leader. So I do encourage all women to work on their communication skills and take their confidence to another level. Thank you for joining Keiser Voices podcast, The Story of Success. We want to invite you to subscribe to this channel so that you can continue growing and learning more about leadership and other topics.
Thank you for journeying with us today on Keiser Voices, The Story of Success. As we close this chapter, remember every story has its next page.